Inferences. Introduction. In this study session, we will discuss inference and the nature of relationships that exist among the four categorical propositions. It should be noted that each of the categorical propositions has a relationship that links it with other propositions. Also to be examined here is immediate inference and its forms. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define the term inference. 2. Explain at least 4 forms of oppositions. Mediate and immediate inferences. An inference is the process by which one proposition is arrived at and affirmed on the basis of one or more other propositions accepted as the starting point of the process. What distinguishes an argument from a mere collection of statements is the inference that is supposed to hold between them. An inference is either mediate or immediate. Immediate inference proceeds from 2 premises to a conclusion in such a way that the propositions together represent a complete argument. An inference is immediate if it proceeds from only one premise to the conclusion. Some of these inferences can be demonstrated by using what is called the traditional square of opposition. The notion of opposition. The notion of opposition here describes the relationship between 2 categorical propositions which have the same subject and predicate terms but differ in their quality or in their quantity. Let us now discuss some of these oppositions. 1. Contradictoriness. When 2 propositions are contradictories, one is a denial of the other. This means that if one is true, the other will be false, and if one is false, the other will be true. In other words, they cannot both be true and they cannot both be false. For example, the A proposition, all politicians are liars, and the O proposition, some politicians are not liars, are contradictories. Similarly, the E proposition, no politicians are liars, and the I proposition, some politicians are liars, are contradictories. 2. Contrariety. 2 propositions are contraries if they cannot both be true, that is, if the truth of either one entails that the other is false. But it is possible for both of them to be false. The A proposition, all humans are animals, and the E proposition, no humans are animals, are contraries. 3. Subcontrariety. 2 propositions are subcontraries if they cannot both be false, though they might both be true. The I proposition, some men are Nigerians, and the O proposition, some men are not Nigerians, are subcontraries. 4. Superalternation. If a proposition is the subaltern of another, it means from the truth of that proposition, you can derive the truth of the other. For example, the A proposition, all men are politicians, is the subaltern of the I proposition, some men are politicians. Similarly, the E proposition, no men are politicians, is the subaltern of the O proposition, some men are not politicians. 5. Subalternation. If a proposition is the subaltern of another, it means from the falsity of that proposition, you can derive the falsity of the other. For example, the I proposition, some men are angels, is the subaltern of the A proposition, all men are angels. Similarly, the O proposition, some men are not angels, is the subaltern of the E proposition, no men are angels. The immediate inferences from the various oppositions we have discussed so far can be summarized as follows. 1. If the A proposition is true, then E is false, I is true, and O is false. 2. If the E proposition is true, then A is false, I is false, and O is true. 3. If the I proposition is true, then E is false, while A and O are undetermined. 4. If the O proposition is true, then A is false, while E and I are undetermined. 5. If A is false, then O is true, while E and I are undetermined. 6. If E is false, then I is true, while A and O are undetermined. 7. If I is false, then A will be false, E will be true, and O will be true. 8. If O is false, then A is true, E is false, and I is true. What can be inferred about the truth or falsehood of the remaining propositions in each of the following if we assume the first to be true, and if we assume it to be false? 1. I. All successful people are intelligent. I. No successful people are intelligent. 2. I. Some dedicated people are successful businessmen. I. Some dedicated people are not successful businessmen. I. No dedicated people are successful businessmen. The first step that we have to undertake if we would arrive at the right answer is that we have to identify the kind of proposition that each of the propositions falls under. Have you done that? Good. You will discover that in the first set, I is an A proposition, while I is an E proposition. From this, we can infer rightly that if the A proposition is true, then the E proposition will be false And when the A proposition is false, the E proposition will be undetermined. The reason for this is that, as you have learned in this session, A and E propositions are contraries. They cannot both be true, but can both be false. In the second set of propositions, I is an I proposition. I is an O proposition, while I is an E proposition. From this, we can infer that when I is true, I will be undetermined and I will be false. This is because I and O propositions are subcontraries. They cannot both be false, but might both be true. While I and E propositions are contradictories. When one is true, the other will be false and vice versa. However, if the first set of proposition were to be false, then I will be true and I will also be true. Further immediate inferences. Apart from the foregoing inferences that are drawn from the traditional square of opposition, the following immediate inferences could also be drawn. Conversion. The process of conversion proceeds when the subject term replaces the predicate term and the predicate term replaces the subject term. In other words, a categorical proposition undergoes conversion by interchanging the subject and predicate terms. The original proposition is called the convertend, while the new proposition is called the converse. The conversion of the four categorical propositions will therefore proceed as follows. A proposition. Convertend. All men are politicians. Converse. All politicians are men. E proposition. Convertend. No men are politicians. Converse. No politicians are men. I proposition. Convertend. Some men are politicians. Converse. Some politicians are men. O proposition. Convertend. Some men are not politicians. Converse. Some politicians are not men. Now, if each set of the above propositions is taken to represent a complete argument, for which of them can we say that the inference is valid? Conversion is not valid for the A proposition except by limitation. The process of limitation involves only universal propositions, and it consists in reducing such propositions to particular propositions. Conversion by limitation for the A proposition proceeds by interchanging the subject term with the predicate term and then changing the quantity of the proposition from universal to particular. Thus, from the proposition, all dogs are animals, the conclusion, some animals are dogs, could be validly inferred, the inference being true conversion by limitation. Conversion is, however, a valid inference when applied to E and I propositions, but not valid for the O proposition. State the converse obverse, and contrapositive of the following propositions and state whether conversion, obversion, or contrapositive is valid for them. 1. No teacher is a graduate. 2. All teachers are graduates. 3. Some teachers are graduates. 4. Some teachers are not graduates. Always remember that the first thing you should do is to break the propositions to simplified form. In that wise, you will discover that 1 is an E proposition, 2 is an A proposition, 3 is an I proposition, while 4 is an O proposition. Having done this, you may now proceed with other steps. For 1. Converse. No graduates are teachers. Obverse. All teachers are non-graduates. Contrapositive. No non-graduates are non-teachers. From the foregoing, we can infer that conversion and obversion are valid for 1, while contrapositive is not valid for it. For 2. Converse. All graduates are teachers. Obverse. No teachers are non-graduates. Contrapositive. All non-graduates are non-teachers. From the foregoing, we can infer that conversion is not valid for 2, while obversion and contrapositive are valid for 2. For 3. Converse. Some graduates are teachers. Obverse. Some teachers are not non-graduates. Contrapositive. Some non-graduates are non-teachers. For 3, conversion and obversion are valid, while contrapositive is not valid. For 4. Converse. Some graduates are not teachers. Obverse. Some teachers are non-graduates. Contrapositive. Some non-graduates are not non-teachers. From this, we can infer that obversion and contrapositive are both valid for 4, while conversion is not valid for it. Obversion. In obverting a proposition, the subject term remains unchanged, and so does the quantity of the proposition being obverted. In obverting a proposition, we change the quality of the proposition and then replace the predicate term by its complement. To obtain the complement of a term, simply add the prefix non to it, or if the expression already contains non, then delete the non from the expression to obtain its complement. The obversion of the 4 categorical propositions will be as follows. A proposition. Obvertend. All men are politicians. Obverse. No men are non-politicians. E proposition. Obvertend. No men are politicians. Obverse. All men are non-politicians. I proposition. Upvertend. Some men are politicians. Obverse. Some men are not non-politicians. O proposition. Upverted. Some men are not politicians. Obverse. Some men are not. Take two. Obverse. Some men are non-politicians. The original proposition is called the upvertend, while the new one is called the obverse. Obversion is a valid form of inference for all the categorical propositions. Contrapositive. To obtain the contrapositive of a given proposition, we replace its subject term by the complement of its predicate term and replace its predicate term by the complement of its subject term. The contrapositive of the four categorical propositions will proceed as follows. A proposition. Premise. All men are politicians. Contrapositive. All non-politicians are non-men. E proposition. Premise. No men are politicians. Contrapositive. No non-politicians are non-men. I proposition. Premise. Some men are politicians. Contrapositive. Some non-politicians are non-men. O proposition. Premise. Some men are not politicians. Contrapositive. Some non-politicians are not non-men. Contrapositive is a valid form of inference for A and O propositions, but not valid for E and I propositions. Contrapositive is only valid for E proposition by limitation. Thus, from the expression, no men are politicians, the conclusion, some non-politician. Thus, from the expression, no men are politicians, the conclusion, some non-politicians are not non-men, could be validly inferred through contraposition by limitation. Study session summary. In this study session, we discussed broadly two types of inferences involving categorical propositions. They are mediate and immediate inferences. Immediate inference proceeds from two premises to a conclusion, whereas an immediate inference proceeds from only one premise to the conclusion. We have looked at the various relationships that exist among the four categorical propositions, following the traditional square of opposition. You learned how to determine the value of other categorical propositions once the value of the one to which they are related is given. We concluded by looking at other immediate inferences that can be drawn by using the notions of conversion, aversion,